Nice.
Okay. Hello. So we're live. Hello, Ken. How are you?
Very good. Thank you, Kobi. Yeah, nice to talk to you.
Hello. So thank you, everybody, for joining us in this session. This session, as this webinar, is a follow-up for a very active and amazing last week with RSA. Last week being dominated by Agentic AI, and its promise, its power, but also the risks associated with it. The agents era is here, and that means a lot of power, but also a lot of risks and new threats. And in this session, Ken and myself will discuss some of the interesting topics around this new exciting domain. Let's start with a quick introduction. So, Ken, maybe you can introduce yourself first.
Sure. Yeah, Ken Huang. I am AI security researcher. Published a few books, and also agent professor for University of San Francisco. I have a few master students that also are interested in both data and AI security. I also co-chair the AI security working groups within Cloud Security Alliance. Started also the AI vulnerability scoring system in OWASP. So heavily involved in open source community and building the public. I also built a tool called the MAESTRO-Sentinel.com tool. People actually use it, so make me happy. Yeah, it's just a quick introduction. Yes.
Amazing to have you here with me, and a great honor. My name is Kobi. I lead the product management team at PlainID. We're the leading authorization company. We've been doing that for quite some time. Authorization, that as we talk about it, is an authorization and for the enterprise, very proactive, runtime oriented, policy-based authorization at scale. We've been realizing together with our customers in the last, I would say, 18 months, with this new inflection of agentic era, that our solution is very much aligned with exactly what's needed in order to control the access for agents. So exactly the topic that we're discussing right now. And I think there's a lot of questions that we've been hearing from customers, we've been hearing from the market, we've seen other players in the domain talk about, and you've wrote a lot about it. And I wanted maybe to start this conversation, Ken, with the MAESTRO threat modeling piece, that framework that you wrote about, which is takes a look at sort of an in-depth approach on how to protect data and agentic AI systems. Can you share a little bit about that, Ken?
Yeah, so I created the MAESTRO threat modeling framework last year. Actually, I did some threat modeling for some agentic AI system using traditional Strata pasta system, and find out that it cannot really address the non-deterministic and also autonomous agent system, right? It also has a very complex identity delegation. So that's why I created this framework. So my thinking is, if you implement an agent system, what are the reference architecture? So I kind of lay out the reference architecture, then trying to find out what the potential threat in this reference architecture. That coming up with the 7 layer of MAESTRO. The first layer is the model. Certainly, the agent need using a large language model or whatever reasoning model it need, and that could have potential threat. So there's a different threat at this layer. And then the data is really very important because it provides the context to the agent. There's a lethal trifecta Simon Wilson mentioned about. If your agent has access to your sensitive internal data and also have access to the external can browsing the website, right? Some of malicious website with poisoned data there, and also can do the action on your data, then that will be problem. So there is also, in addition to lethal trafficker, there's other kind of threat vectors in the data layer. But I think the lethal traffic is a really easy way to think about that, but not sufficient as well. That's why MAESTRO is really important, and most major banks and bigger farmers are now using it. And the third layer is the agent framework. So if you look at the OpenClaw, all those, right, the recent OpenClaw, but all this framework, the Clue AI, the LangGraph, they are the orchestration, very good orchestration framework. They are not the identity or security framework. That's why we need to build a kind of adapter or plug in to authentication, like you said, authorization, monitoring. That is still lacking. I do have a GitHub kind of, I call it zero agent, trying to deal with that. There's a few people use it. And then I don't think we have time to go to each layer. So then the top layer is really the agent ecosystem. You have agent-to-agent communications through Google A2A protocol. And then you have the threat, right? The impersonation of the agent. And also the identity play in this space as well. So I just want to conclude on this question. That's a very fascinating question. It's too expanded if I answer fully, so I just leave some of it open. Actually, I would like to ask you a question, Kobi. So, you know, the legacy IAM protocol like OAuth and the SAML, they are really good in Web 2, like for people logging, right, or for single sign-on, and for social logging, they are good. Now, in the autonomous agent area, what could be a critical break point, and what should be the minimum viable fix enterprise need to make it work?
Oh, fantastic! Thanks, Ken. So, I think obviously, you know, as you mentioned, OAuth, SAML, they're essentially they weren't designed for autonomous agent, whatever what we're kind of doing. So there are a few breakpoints to think about, just logically about what happens when you use them, as we understand. So first of all, a lot of time there's no human in the loop. So even if a human starts the interaction of an agent, like for the agent operates autonomously or continuously, not necessarily during logging time, which is the time for those protocols typically to be engaged, or to have that consent, or to have that checkbox, or to verify. So that's one main issue. A second issue is the fact that typically those OAuth SAML introduce essentially a scope which is fairly binary or coarse-grained. So either you can express somebody can do or cannot do, like very, very coarse-grained, and you cannot express something very context-aware from a permission perspective through those protocols. And I think the last item is that, again, this is from a authorization perspective, this is a login time or a minting time of the OAuth SAML token or whatever it is, and not during the actual runtime. So not in the context at the intent moment of action of the agent. So in order to kind of figure out how to fix that, you need first, as far as we understand, and I think the industry agrees, and you probably have a lot to add to that. I'll follow up with some question on you on that. First of all, we understand agents needs their own identity. It's not just to borrow of a human credential or something like that. That's the first thing. Second, we need a way to replace the static scope with something much more dynamic that includes the identity, the context, the intent in order to make a decision, and not something based on a static decision, consent or non-consent, or approve or not approved. And then lastly, which is something I'll probably reiterate across this discussion, we think there's a live, dynamic, runtime decisioning mechanism that has to be a part of the agent execution path. Before it acts, something needs to be validated based on those intent, context, etc., before actually doing something. And I think that kind of covers the challenges and how we think it makes sense to overcome or address them. But again, as mentioned, I think agent identity is a very active and live topic. And we emphasize that you need an agent identity, and the frameworks, the Cloud Security Association and others emphasize that AI agents needs a verifiable identity that's distinct from human users. So in your perspective, what does a good agent identity actually look like in practice? So from what should an enterprise organization need to think about or get right first? Ken, if you can.
Right. So yeah, I think we did publish a white paper from the Cloud Security Alliance. Many people review it. There's also archive research paper published before that. Yeah, so we define the agent identity. We kind of trying to propose it, right? So basically, you have this kind of uniquely identify it. That's the kind of the key, primary key for that. And then you have some essential attribute that we propose. It's basically the model, like get to which model you use and what your agent stack is. Like if you're using launching or all this supply chain component or software component, right? It's a part of it. And then what you can do in terms of capability. Then you can kind of sign it or using a verifiable credential to sign it. That's what we propose. Of course, there's no standard definition yet. So just by the way, this morning, 3 a.m., I wake up early in the morning in the ITU workshop, which happened in Geneva, but they allow me to dive in remotely and also discuss of agent identity. And there's no standard yet, right? ITU is trying to figure this out. IETF is trying to figure this out. And we propose it. And I don't think it's final, but yeah, people can take a look. But I think the key thing is really what you said, is you need the agent identity. You need to solve how do you do the attestation, provisioning? How do you do the authentication? How do you do the authorization? Then the auditing. Eventually, like if something break, you need to do incident response. You can tie the identity. You can find it, right? So there was a question actually during the ITU meeting this morning. Some people said in a multiple agents system, that's possible that some agent, they could switch some context or attribute. How can it happen, right? So my kind of answer was, if you change the model or you change some of key attribute, that's a different identity. You need to go through the provision engine to ask for different identifier before you can do this. So this should be a hard kind of switch that should be implemented. Yeah, so I think the industry is trying to still to figure this out, but there is some of the thinking already in place.
Yeah, I think we see that as well. And clearly, I think the key from an authorization perspective is not only to have that agent identity, but to understand the context and to understand the human identity, agent identity, system identity, and obviously the resources and the context and intent, right, in order to actually be able to utilize that, in order to have that dynamic kind of decisioning or controls. But again, I think you touched a little bit on that. Maybe you can a little bit share more about what happens in multi-agent systems, or when what happens. There is kind of like an agent that calls another agent, or a chain of a multi-agent. So this also raises a lot of concerns, right? So even if I have a single identity, how do we prevent trust from being kind of over-provisioned across agent, as sub-agent are spawned as part of the activity? Can you maybe relate to that a little bit?
Yeah, so this is a tough question. It's also a good question. I think we can look at from multiple agent and also from multiple turn of prompt injection or perspective, right? So multiple agent, when if there's a task kickoff, and one agent can delegate another agent for do some work, and that agent, if there's no dynamic policy to validate this the whole context, from provenance of identity to the context of the task and the intent, and then validate it for each hop. Like the multiple agent has a multiple hop, right? So each hop you do need to revalidate. Cannot really assume that it's a session scope. It's that's why traditional legacy systems, the binary, Kobi, you said the binary yes or no is break down, right? It's really you need to have the original intent and the session or whatever already have in the context, and the then do a dynamic policy evaluation. I think this also the question that from LinkedIn community, John asked. I think he asked lots of good question, right? One question he asked is in latent space, and the agent decided to do something. Also, if you have multiple prompt, and then it decided to have a privileged access to some sensitive data that it should not do, and you cannot really explain it because it's in latent space. How do you do it, right? So again, like you cannot really give this agent a whole session scope without revalidation. In each scope, you need to revalidate. And this is also coming back to my Substack article about intent-based access control. It's not easy to do, but there is a way you can do it. So my proposal is you can have a ontology. The ontology is tied to your domain. One simple question is like, if you say, I want to buy an Apple, that Apple could be Apple phone, iPhone, or can be a fruit, and can be even New York City, the Apple, right, city. If you do not constrain the domain, but if your domain is a cell phone, if you say I want to buy an Apple, so it's Apple iPhone, right? So the same thing with your intent-based access control. You need to translate natural language to binding it to intent, and the intent then translate into a policy or CEDA policy that you can enforce. So that was my article, like trying to propose an approach there. But this is a fascinating question. I think uh, we as industry will figure this out. There is some subtle meaning and subtle intent that we may still not have solution yet. But I think, yeah, Kobi, maybe you can answer some of this. Yeah, I'll let you piggyback on this.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree here that this is a challenging domain, and what we've been hearing from our customers is very similar to what you were saying. Is saying, yeah, we're trying to figure this out yet, but we need to figure out a way to control those actions at different points across the execution pipeline, and at each hop of the execution pipeline. If there's a multi-hop or a delegated hop or on a behalf of kind of activity, you need to reiterate and revalidate, and that's why runtime, context-aware dynamic control is critical, and obviously also introduces challenges, which I think we've been seeing with some of our customers trying to resolve some of the POCs, and early deployments have been happening in our expertise. So our approach from if you think about it in like concrete architectural kind of how to implement this in our experience, I think there are some key things that needs to be done, like principles that needs to be done in order to do that. And so
Kobi, I maybe just trying to drill down a little bit on this, right?
yeah.
So there's architecture decisions that for real-time context-aware authorization at machine speed.
Mhm.
As you do not want to have this take a long time to respond. So there must be a good architecture decision which make or break the enterprise ability to actually achieve this at a scale. What that should be.
Exactly what I was alluding to. So obviously each domain, each environment, each landscape is a little different, but some key principles, the way we see it, is first and foremost, you can't have the authorization stack or the access control stack tied into the code of the agent itself or the applications, or you have to somehow have wider externalized control plane that controls those authorizations. You have to externalize the decision. You have to put the decision points in the execution path, but you have to have it externally than the actual agent implementation itself. And as you mentioned, that they introduce or might introduce challenges from a performance or latency, but the way that we see our customers are using this is in a way we really believe in, where you actually build a kind of a holistic, centralized control plane from a management perspective on how to build, to author, to build out the logic of the policies, but a very distributed kind of not just geographically or horizontally, but also vertically distributed decisioning and enforcement components on every tech stack that the agent uses. So it could be on a data, it could be on an API, it could be on an MCP, it could be on every interaction that those agents would use. And because you break that down and you have those policies and the context in a very distributed way, and you have to think about that not as part of the code, but you externalize it, it gives you A, much better control, B, the ability to change dynamically or to adapt your policies based on the changes that happens within the domain, or as as your agent infrastructure grows, you don't have to deal with per agent kind of controls. You do something like more holistically. And also, if something changes from a policy perspective, an enterprise level policy perspective, or from a resource or data domain perspective, so I don't know, whatever, a resource changes classification, risk level, so an agent shouldn't be able to access it right now, this has to happen dynamically. You can't do kind of like offline or non-in-the-loop provisioning that happens once a day or once a week. It has to be, as the resource changes, the policy should dynamically be aligned and the decision should be enforced accordingly. And that's how our product essentially is built in a way, and that's how our customers integrate with it. And it started actually, again, from those distinct use cases, but as AI usage has grown and those pipelines is starting to become cascaded or combined. So an agent would call a data point or would invoke an API or would do something, all of these separate distributed kind of enforcement pods play together based on the high-level policy that's defined. And that's, I think, a critical thing to think of. You need to get out of the notion that you built in the controls per agent, per domain, and have something much more holistic, externalized to the actual agent infrastructure, but very tightly coupled. It's part of the execution path.
Wow, that's good. So, is it possible also like you can co-host or co-locate the policy decision point with a policy enforcement point?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, and this can happen as mentioned. It could be on an API gateway level. It could be on a microservice level, maybe on the Kubernetes stack, on the infrastructure, or it could be on an applicative level. Or in a database. So, and I think that's actually very critical for us for our customers and for the industry to understand that in order to be performant and robust and scalable, you have to have that notion where you have the decisioning and the enforcement and the actual, I would say, authoring, and then we'll maybe talk about it a little bit later about the ability to audit, to track what happened in a very kind of streamlined way. And I think that's one of the things I actually wanted to, as part of that control, right? We see a lot of engagement from our customers, part of these notions with protecting the MCP tool usage or the RAG pipeline, they essentially utilize our product in order to engage those same kind of controls as part of the execution pipeline with we're accessing these tools through MCP or a RAG collection or invoking a skill. So maybe you can add to that from your perspective, Ken, some thoughts about how these new kind of patterns of MCP, RAG pipelines, and etc. create some new or identity-based attack surfaces or threat vectors. So that's how we see it. I thought maybe you could share a little bit more light from your perspective on that.
Yeah, so I think the MCP tools, RAG pipeline or agent skill, currently agent skill is really getting more into everyone's mind because of the OpenClaw actually popularized the skill use. But the skill by default, if you deploy it, it assumes your identity, right? It is not really assume the particular task. You do not have, currently, it's not native have a way to say this skill have this particular subset of privileges. So that, and there is many skill threat. Actually, we are launching today, actually, the OWASP top 10 for agent skill risks. So if people are interested, join this OWASP project that we created actually during my visit to Oslo. We have a project summit meeting in Oslo, Norway, early this month. So we are starting it. So there's a top 10, like one of the top is really the malicious skill, right? Or the poison skill. That already happening. People did a lot of research, and there's other items as well. So, yeah, I would say the top threat vector is certainly the malicious skill, and especially combined with overprivileged identity. It can delete your email, or it can delete your database. It can exfiltration of your sensitive data. Yeah, so this tie back to what we discussed. We have to have the intent-based access control for the skill, for the MCP, and also for the RAG pipeline as well. I think we only have 2 more minutes, so I will ask you, Kobi, a question as a final question. So when AI agent autonomously access sensitive data and something goes wrong, existing governance framework does not really fully address this, right? So where do you agree on what accountability should looks like and what needed to change in the regulation first? I think a regulator framework is hard, but at least from the accountability perspective.
Yeah, good question. And I think, again, as you mentioned, a lot of these things in this domain is still active and being discussed. But on our perspective and tooling wise, I think accountability problem means eventually an audit trail problem. So you need some kind of an audit trail to know what happened first in order to be able to be accountable. You need some kind of a logging or an ability to see what was asked, what was decided, what policy governed that decision, what data was actually provided in every agent interaction. But we need that governance to be built not just for humans but also for agents. And I think that's a very challenging. First, we need the data of the audit, and then we need to figure out how to use it. And obviously, I think we will see more and more regulatory requirements. And one of the things I encourage our customers to do is to think first on maybe making sure you got the right logs. You capture all the audits of everything, because eventually, when the regulation would require it, you'll need to have a way to prove, to have evidence, and to investigate incidents. You have to have the data, right, to do that. And so in that sense, authorization isn't just, from our perspective, a security control, it's also a governance mechanism, because it's a part that builds also the logging of who did what and when and why. So that helps you have that kind of evidence trail that's needed.
Yes, yeah, I think it's a tie back to how do you identify or how do you define the agent ID, right? If it's a change in the middle, some of behavior,
Exactly.
it's still the same identity. Cool.
Ken, we have kind of wrapped our kind of time, but we do have a few questions from the audience. Maybe let's spend like 1 or 2 minutes just to answer these if possible. I'll read them out.
Sure.
There is a question from Siva from Fannie Mae. Hello, Siva. Ken asked, what are your recommendations? Ken, what are your recommendations for how the agent should be granted data access authorization and governance, kind of what we covered right now? Do you have any top of their head recommendation to an organization that is now building an agentic pipeline?
Yeah, I would say first you need to understand the threat. So using MAESTRO threat modeling, that of course it's not just uncover some of identity issue, right? It also uncover some of the model issues, the data issue, the framework issues, the supply chain. That's all you know when you deploy the application. Is it secure, the agent application, right? And we do have some initiative. It's called the proof of control. I welcome community to join. We announced it during the RSAC side event about the it's through the AI Advanced Society. Is basically you have to, if you can, using mathematical proof control framework. So mathematical meaning that digitally prove that you have this control in place. For example, you're using the encryption. So you have a key, right? So a PKI is a key. Use HSM, so you can mathematically prove it. Or you in the silicon level, you have trusted execution environment. So this is all going. We're actually using MAESTRO framework to also do this threat modeling to see which layer should be applied. I think it's maybe a bigger topic. Yes.
Yeah, I guess. One more question from Hamad. I can give you a few answers, Hamad, and then maybe you can add. There he asks about any thoughts on logic layer prompt control injection threats in agentic systems. So on our side, from an authorization perspective, we think from an access control perspective, which doesn't cover everything, we think you have to have, as mentioned, across the pipeline of an agent, you have to have the controls on every aspect. So it has to be on the input and the prompt layer. It has to be on the data retrieval layer. It has to be on the tool invocation layer. And it actually needs to go also on the response or eventually a response comes out from you have to have a control on that as well. Maybe you want to filter a PII or something because of the non-deterministic issues, agent works at. You want to make sure you have that as well. But Ken, maybe just shortly, maybe add your thoughts on the logical prompt control threat domain or vector.
Yeah. So just say for disclosure, Hamad and the team and myself, we have done quite a lot of research and published papers, and also in the Cloud Security Alliance on the logical level, prompt injection, all this. So yeah, I agree with your approach. You basically have to understand the logic or intent, right, to validate it using the identity as one of the arsenal that in you, right, for you. But in addition to the identity, there's other type of control, right? One thing is really you cannot 100% solve prompt injection. Mathematically, that's not possible yet, right? I don't know, like some people say we can solve it, but mathematically it's a stochastic model. How can you really, it's a feature, right? How can you really solve this? What we can say is we should try to kind of reduce the possibility of prompt injection, especially the multiple turn or crescendo attack as much as possible. That's why we need a logical layer control there.
Awesome. Thank you, Ken. There is one last question. I'll take it quickly because we're really out of the time frame allocated for this. The question is around policies. So obviously, I'll try to sum up the question. I understand externalizing policy-driven authorization mechanism. That means maybe that the policy layer itself actually becomes kind of the question is, what happens to the policy level? Is the policy definition itself could be risky? If you don't define the policies in the right way, or it doesn't cover all the use cases, that essentially becomes kind of like a critical point. A very good point, definitely. We won't be able to cover all of it right now because of time constraints, and I encourage you to to reach out to us offline and get more info. I'll give you a few words from our perspective. First and foremost, one of the main principles you would employ is a whitelist approach, which means anything that's not clearly articulated is prohibited. That's the one thing that you need to start with. That reduces a lot of the risk level because anything that you haven't explicitly stated that should be provided does not happen. A second is treating policies in the same level of the policies for access control, in the same, not as an afterthought, but in the same notion that you treat any security domain or notion that's critical for your organization, which means you need to build in, you need to have the way or mechanisms to simulate them, to verify them, to scope them in the right way, and then to approve them and have a life cycle that controls how they are built, tested, approved, and promoted to a production environment in a governed way and not as an afterthought. So obviously it's a big domain, and we can cover that maybe in a follow-up webinar, but not here. But definitely a very good question and to the point. And there are solutions in the market to do it. That's how big enterprises utilize it. But a very good question and to the point. I think that's kind of covered what we wanted to discuss today. Even extend a little bit our time. Ken, it was really insightful to hear some of your thoughts, and I read some of the articles and the items that you've published. Super interesting and relevant, and looking forward to hear more and seeing some of the material. And a real pleasure for me to co-host this session with you. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kobi. Yeah.
And thanks the audience.
Yeah. Thanks in audience. Enjoy the talk. Thanks.
Yeah. So thanks everyone, and see you soon.
Yeah, see you soon. Okay. So we can end the talk, right?
Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye, Ken. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Take care. Thanks.